So my name is Chris, this is my Aston Martin V8 Vantage, and to be honest with you, I don't claim to be professional, a master of anything, or if I'm being honest, particularly talented. But one thing I am good at is having a good crack at things, and if I do get stuck, I'm definitely not afraid to ask for a bit of help. And that's why in this video, I'm going to do something I've never done before, and attempt to wrap my Aston Martin. But before we can do that, there is still a couple of little jobs that I need to do before we can actually lay down some wrap on the car and hope that it goes pretty well. The first thing is on the bumper, there is a clip that is missing behind here, meaning that it doesn't fit quite right and it just isn't quite sitting securely. So we need to transplant the one off the old bumper onto this one so it sits and fits properly. And the second one really shouldn't happen, but unfortunately it is very common on these cars. And that is corrosion in the driver's door. So around the door handle here, we've got corrosion, and also here at the bottom of the door too. So it'd look rubbish if we were to wrap straight over that. So before I show the colour to you guys and get on with it, we've got to get those problems sorted first. So let's go. So the first step in this little list of things to do is to massacre off the old clip from the old bumper, which is already trashed, so we may as well just hack it off, ready for it to go on the new bumper. And with that removed, we can head over to Luke's, the same guy who painted the BMW, and he was going to help us prepare this correctly to make sure that these problems didn't reoccur. So with the car jacked up, we could start removing the front bumper because that needed the holes filling in, and also a small repair on the side that you can see outlined there with a Sharpie, and then we can turn our attention to the door. With roughly 10 bolts removed, the bumper comes off pretty easily because we still don't have arch liners on the car. So next up, Luke sands down the corrosion on the door around the door handle, at the bottom corner by the wing, and there's also a tiny bit up the top by the wing mirror too. He also starts to prepare the front bumper to have the holes filled in so it has that nice, smooth, clean look. And once that's done, we can start filling in those holes with some fiberglass and wait for those to set while we work on the door. So while Luke's working the door, I turn my attention to that corner of the bumper where the clip should be by cleaning it up, removing any old adhesive residue and giving it a good thorough sand. I then apply a 2-part adhesive to the bumper and to the clip and give it a good thorough covering and give it a stick on, and that should be sorted. That's if I got it in the right place. So now the fiberglass is set on the bumper, we can flip it over and apply a light skim of filler and then give it a good sand afterwards to make sure it's perfectly flat. And whilst Luke was doing that, I was going to prime the areas which he's repaired and just thoroughly masking off the whole car before I do so, because overspray is the worst thing. And once the door was primed, we could then also prime the bumper, which had fully cured and was good to go. Once that was dry, final reassembly, and the car was more or less ready for wrap. Okay, so the ugly work is now done on the Aston. All the corrosion is dealt with on the door, and also the front number plate holes are now smoothed out too. So now if you were to paint this car in the future after removing the wrap, there wouldn't be loads of work to do underneath it. But it is absolutely hanging out its arse, and we could not wrap it like this. So the next thing to do, stage 2, is get it clean. So I believe when wrapping a car, you want to make sure it's as clean as possible in all of the crevices, nooks and crannies, and all the parts of the car which you may not normally clean. The reason being is because the wrap tucks into these areas, and if it's not cleaned thoroughly, then it's not going to stick right either.
So after a thorough snow foam and rinse, I snow foam the car over again to go around all of those crevices with a brush to try and clean those out as best as possible. And then, as normal, going over the car with a mitt and a shampoo, just being as thorough as possible to make sure you don't miss anything. And then finally, after a good rinse down and dry, it was ready to be pulled inside.
So as I said earlier in the video, I haven't actually got a clue how to wrap a car. I've never done it before, but I'm going to give it a crack. But it is nice, and one of the things that's great about cars is that it draws people together. But unfortunately, I'm stuck with this man. Should we do it? Yeah. So boom. You're so fun, let's do it!
So the final step before we can start wrapping the car, which I know this has been a long process, but we want to make sure it looks as good as possible, is claying the car. This is a way to remove surface contaminants which you don't necessarily remove from normal wash methods. So I wanted to start on the smallest part of the car to wrap that was possible. So I started off on the boot. Because this was going to be done in 2 sections and part of it was staying black, I thought this would be a good place to practice.
So now it's time to talk colour, and I wanted to pick something. Well, it's been a hard decision, to be honest with you, trying to pick the colour for the Aston, because there's so many things that I could do, and whether I want to keep it close to what an Aston Martin should be or do something completely out there. And well, let's cut to the chase. This is what I've chose. So what I've chosen for the Aston is Oracle Lagoon, which is supposed to be a replica, I believe, of the M3 Laguna Seca Blue, but actually, to be honest with you, it looks more like Porsche Miami Blue to me. So anyway, hopefully it pops on the car, hopefully it looks well, and hopefully I can get it on there without too many hassles.
So what we do is we run knifeless tape along each line where you want it to finish, so you don't have to put a knife to your paintwork, and that way it avoids the risk of any damage when you're cutting it. So after a quick measure up and figuring out how much wrap I need, I then cut that off the roll and then start to work it on the car. So once I've got that section wrapped and gone thoroughly over the edge of the knifeless tape, I could then remove the string out of the centre of that, which will cut the wrap really nicely. And I'll be honest, it seemed like things were off to a pretty good start, so that was kind of half of one panel done. But then I go and mess it up cutting the centre brake light out, so it's got to come off and we've got to go again. And with a more successful second attempt, I could then turn my attention to the top half of the boot. Luckily, it was quite a hot day, I believe around 30 degrees when we started wrapping this, so it made the wrap quite workable and I had less of a need to use heat, but it definitely did still test me and it wasn't an easy job to do. Matt did teach me a few methods like using masking tape to make sure the wrap doesn't stick to that area of the car, and also very patiently taught me how to cut, which I still hadn't mastered and I'd probably say is one of the hardest parts of wrapping a car. It quite quickly became apparent it made it 10 times easier if you had a second set of hands to help lay the wrap on the car, at least on the larger panels especially. But on the first day, it really felt like we were making some progress. And we managed to finish that first day by getting a door, a boot and a rear quarter wrapped. But started the second day by removing the wrap on the rear quarter because I'd messed it up again. So in order to not wind myself up, I then turned my attention onto the back bumper, which again I was on my own at this point, so it wasn't the easiest to lay, but luckily the bumper was quite small and also quite flat, so it made it less challenging than what I think another bumper might be. I also removed the tail lights and wrapped right into there to make sure I got the best finish possible.
Chris is about to cut around the door handle, which is got to be a precise cut because it's eye level. Let's see if we can manage it.
I've left these clips in kind of chronological order, so if they are a bit jilted in the way it's done, it's because this is the order I've done them. I've wrapped a panel and left it until I've had a bit of guidance on how to cut it. Like I said in a previous clip, I think cutting the wrap is actually the hardest part, which surprised me, to be honest with you. I thought getting it on the panel would be the harder part, but getting a nice, neat cut is definitely the more challenging part of this job. But with a bit of guidance, I did start getting there.
Nice. These need a bit of heat. Heat that all in. Fantastic.
Next up, the front bumper. Again, this is like the back bumper, but even smaller, so I was quite thankful for that, really, because I think bumpers can sometimes be very, very challenging. The only hard part on this was the recess where the grille goes, but again, this is quite a forgiving area because once my grille goes in, it will disguise it, but I wanted to make sure it looked as good as possible. And one part that I was told would be challenging on this car was actually the side skirt, and I was surprised because I found this quite easy, to be honest with you. This was quite a nice part to do. You could just essentially wrap it flat from the door to the outer edge of the side skirt and then heat it into it and stretch the wrap into that recess. The only part of this I couldn't trim was the bottom edge because obviously the car was on the ramp, so I had to wait until it was off the ramp to be able to trim that. So now I had built up some confidence and felt like I was getting at least to a reasonable standard on the car, so I wanted to try and tackle the main focal point, the bonnet. So once that was stripped down and I had all the grills and the badges removed and it was clayed and properly cleaned, we could then cut the wrap and lay that on the panel. Now there may be some people who have noticed that I did actually help wrap in Matt's Range Rover a tiny bit in one of his videos, but I'll be honest with you, I only laid the wrap on the car, I didn't do any trimming, and that's about the only experience I have, so to wrap a full car like this for me was a big challenge. As you can see, especially for a larger flat panel like this, having two sets of hands was an absolute godsend. So with the bonnet trimmed and the edges tucked, I could then go back to a panel which defeated me before, but I wasn't going to let it defeat me again. So with both sides now done and the rear quarter finished and trimmed, I could then start turning my attention onto what I thought was going to be the most tricky panel, which was the wings. So to wrap that wing, I've got to remove this trim here, which is bolted in the most awkward way possible, and in removing the bolts for that, I also did damage the wrap on the door, which I was absolutely gutted about, but the bolt was just so inaccessible and we had to make up the most daft little tool in order to be able to access it without taking the wing off. It was just inevitable, to be honest with you. Thank God I managed to remove the trim from the driver's side without damaging the door, but as soon as that trim was off, I then rewrapped the passenger door because we couldn't let that damage stay there. And to be honest with you, I feel like mentally this was probably the most challenging part of the job. Feeling like you've done a panel and then having to redo it because you've messed something up or because you've damaged it by doing something else. And yeah, it was very trying. So now to tackle the final panels on the car, the wings. These, as I said, are going to be the most challenging because of the shape of them and the size of them, and also the fact you've got to cut around the headlights, and there's that trim and insert to kind of cut around as well. So it was not going to be an easy task, but me and Callum managed to knock it out the park, and I feel like we absolutely nailed it. So with that done and the trims put back in, the car was more or less there.
So in one of the previous videos, we tried to fit a convertible V12S boot to my non-convertible, which obviously didn't work. And in that video, I said I was sorting something else out, which is this. This is a ProDrive Aston Martin V8 Vantage spoiler, which is essentially a carbon fibre extension to the normal boot, which then gives you that kind of V12 ducktail. So let's send that on.
So this was the last job for the Aston before the wrap job was complete. I know it's not technically the wrap part, but it is a nice finishing touch to do. So me and Liam line it up perfectly, and with a bit of brute force, giving it a good squeeze on, the car was done.
So I am finally glad to announce that my Aston Martin is completely wrapped, trimmed and finished in terms of the colour change, and I'll be honest with you, I could not be happier. It's been such a roller coaster of emotions in the sense of there's been ups and downs and parts where I wanted to give up and then parts where I felt like it was going well, and to be honest with you, I couldn't be much happier with the result. Now I'm hoping that watching this video has convinced some of you guys to have a go at working on your car yourself, whether that be wrapping it or doing something else that you were a little bit uncomfortable to do, but now you want to push yourself out of your comfort zone and give it a try. I'd 100% recommend it. And I'll be honest with you, I've been very, very fortunate to have some great mates I can fall back and rely on their help in order to get me through wrapping this car. But that's one of the things I love about working on cars. It brings people together, doing something that you wouldn't normally do, working on a project together, and then, you know, say for example, someone's helped me out, I'll have no problems helping them out in the future, and vice versa. It all goes around and everyone gets things done and achieves great things like this. And like I've already said, I could not be much happier with the way this has turned out. I know it's a first punt at a job and the first time I've ever wrapped a car, but on the whole, I think it looks pretty good. There's, you know, there is a few bits, there's probably something on every panel which isn't perfect, but at the same time, that means now that I'm not too scared to enjoy the car, because if something does happen to it, I can peel that wrap off, re-wrap the panel, and we're good to go again. And on top of that, I've also learned a new skill. 2 weeks ago, I would have never been able to do this, and now, with a bit of help from my mates and some graft, we've managed to achieve that, which I think is pretty impressive. And honestly, it's been such a journey getting it to this point, and I cannot believe that when I turn around and get out of this car, that it's actually mine. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's just stunning, honestly. I can't get over it. So hopefully you guys are enjoying these videos, watching me build stuff like this, and if you are, make sure you subscribe so we can carry on doing it. But there we have it. After 4 long days graft, my Aston Martin is now looking one colour and looking a whole lot better for it. And I'm sure you guys are going to let me know down below what you think to my workmanship and also what you think to my colour choice too. But the fact is, all that matters is that I absolutely love it. But unfortunately, that's going to be it for this video. If you have enjoyed it, please make sure you subscribed, smash a like on the video too, and I'll catch you next time.